Greetings, fellow tacticians, and welcome to... Hang on. What is this broken hellscape and machine that we're looking at over here? Yes, this is something a little bit different. For obvious reasons, or reasons that should be obvious, my interest in football and Football Manager has waned just a little bit. I'll be back into it, most probably, when the new version of the game kicks in. But for now, we're looking at these big, lumpy machines over here. And this strange guy with stuff on his face. This is Roguetech, a mod, an overhaul mod for the base game of Battletech by Harebrained Schemes, if I'm not wrong. HBS down there at the bottom right, and Paradox Interactive as well. So there's a lot of good development going into this game. It's something you can pick up for not too much because it is quite old, and as you can see here, there's a bunch of DLC for the game which is out, and on top of that we've layered in the Roguetech mod. And the reason I'm bringing it to you right now is I think this is one of the most in-depth, granular tactical experiences that you can find in computer gaming at the moment. Let's dive in. So the Roguetech mod is stewarded by Lady Electo and her team, and essentially Roguetech or Battletech is in the same universe as MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, MechWarrior Online, MechWarrior 5 Clans, which is my favorite kind of FPS version of this game. You've got the little cartoon series from the 90s, which I think is on YouTube at the moment. Not a huge fan, but it does jump into a little bit of the lore and the background of what's going on. There are like 100 novels as well. I've read about 90% of them. Those also go deep into the lore. We'll get to that in a second. But there is a ton of stuff from this universe. The key product, I believe, is the tabletop wargame, which ironically I have not played at all. That's the one part of Battletech that I have not touched at all, and I think it is the core part of it. All of the novels and all of that support the tabletop wargame. But the computer games have become pretty big in their own right, the ones that I mentioned earlier. This one, bit of a cult classic, and I think Roguetech is the be-all, end-all experience. Just to note, there's a couple of other similar mods to Roguetech, but Roguetech is the one that I really enjoy most. So immediately with games like this, what is the entire point? And obviously it is the mercenary trope. You are the leader of a mercenary company. Off you go. Mercenaries is a key part of the branding of the whole series. In fact, book number 1, which is about the Grey Death Legion, mercenary company, kind of introduces you to the lore of the whole series via a mercenary captain, and you're kind of put into the same role when you play this game. Again, this is Roguetech. If you play Battletech and you play campaign mode, you're jumped in, again, as a mercenary captain, into a contained storyline within the universe. What universe exactly? Let's take a look. This is the universe, and these are all different planets that you can visit. You start Roguetech in a timeline that you select. There are different starting points, 3049 and 3080, I believe. There might be one more now going into the past, and then the map will change based on the reality at that point in the lore story. The circular things are areas that I've visited before, and the color coding, as I was about to mention a moment earlier, depends on which kind of neo-feudalistic house is controlling these planets. We'll get to that in a moment, again, because we need to go over the fun part. As a mercenary company, you are in charge of a bunch of pilots like these. These are the players, the human players, in this little game of war that you are engaging in. And then you have the mechanical players in this little game of war. These are mechs. Currently, a lot of them are being worked on, so let's just advance the timeline a little bit to get them repaired. We've got some jobs that are being completed. Okay, we've got enough mechs ready, I think, now to show you a little bit more of a picture. So there you go. They are out of Mech Bay. A lot of these guys are ready to roll. You click on them, you get a little bit of a visual. You can do basic customization with your color schemes and whatnot. But essentially, the proof is in the pudding in Roguetech. You can go into the Mech Bay and have a look at everything inside of the mech. You can drag and drop all these little pieces out. You can pull in and pull out pretty much any kind of component that you want. This is super granular. You can change so many things, and each one has an effect. There are different trade-offs and benefits to these different things. Each of these components is playing a different role. You are limited in terms of the space inside, so physical space, the number of slots here, as you can see. Each of these is taking 3 slots. You have a total tonnage of the mech, as you can see up there, 65. Those are the limitations you have. Mechs generate heat. That's why we've got all these heat sinks, so on and so forth. We'll jump back in here a little bit later. I wanted to give you a very brief overview first of all. So point being, you have this stable of mechs, you have a stable of mech warriors, you put them together, you put them in these little cockpits up here, and then off you go into battle. So you go into some kind of engagement, you are working for someone, so someone is your employer of your mercenary company, and you fight against someone in one of these missions. So let's click this mission, for example. It's a battle in a polar environment, and this little indicator over here, these skulls, that's the difficulty. Difficulty can go way higher than what it is right now. Now, you can set up the difficulty to work in different ways, like you can have a company rating, and then the whole game will generate missions of an equivalent level, or you can have different planets offering different difficulty. So this game doesn't work in one way. You can tailor the settings of the mod to suit however you want to play. But again, that's an advanced concept that we'll probably forget about right now. Point being, we were going in to look at a battle. This battle here, Polar, you've got a little bit of a briefing, which gives you a few clues about what's going to go on. The difficulty rating will explain, how difficult it is, or how advanced the units on the other side might be. Also, this is your pay, max pay of 3.1 million credits. And you've got a max salvage over here. On the top left, you've got the finances screen. So as a mercenary company, you're trying not to go bankrupt. As long as you keep this operation liquid, I think is the word, you are absolutely fine. So if we took max cash from this mission, that'll pay for us for like a month and a half. Brilliant. However, the fun stuff is in salvage, because whatever you destroy, you can go out and pick up. And that was a law thing as well, interestingly. You would have to negotiate salvage with your employers, so your employers would get a lot of the salvage. You would get some part of the salvage. What part? You would choose how much. You can see this 211 here. That means you select 2 pieces and you get 11 random pieces. So you cherry pick the best stuff, and then you get a random assignment of 11, and then all of the rest essentially, quote unquote, goes to your employer. This then works as a little slider bar. So you get more payment and less salvage, or more salvage and less payment. Based on the description of the mission and the star rating, you can kind of figure out how good the salvage is going to be. Early on, you probably want more salvage regardless, because any kind of components are good. Also, the place you are, so the planet you're on, can define how good or bad your salvage is going to be, because some planets are just more advanced with more advanced opponents. The people you're fighting also will make a difference. So here, planetary government could honestly be anything. But if you were fighting a faction, you'll get faction loot, and you might like some faction stuff more than other factions. Again, concept for later. So we'll go something like this, and into the mission we go. First, obviously, we're going to have to choose our lineup. Like any kind of mercenary company or football manager game, you got to choose your team. So you line up your mechs. You've got lots of lances, so lance A, B, and C, where you can put units in. The different types of units you can put in are defined over here. So we have mostly mechs, and we can go mechs up to this point. Here, as you see, there's no mech. We can have tanks and helicopters and whatever, or VTOLs as they're called in World, in these slots. But I'm not even sure I want to go too many mechs, because the lance rating is exactly the same as the difficulty rating of the mission right now. So that's fine. We're going in. All right, we're ready to drop. This little thing is our Leopard dropship. That's kind of what ferries our mechs and personnel and VTOLs and tanks into the area of operations. We already know the AO is polar. So polar, as you can see, it's kind of cold. There's lots of snow on the ground. You've got a little bit of flavor stuff from your executive officer. He's going to tell you some stuff. Your other backup team might tell you a little bit about what's going on in this mission. And this is from an ally. So the game can actually drop ally units as well. They're not super valuable, but they can serve as meat shields, which is kind of nice. Then you're going to drop your troops. This is kind of when the tactics starts, because here our mission is to destroy a local government lance. This is their last known position. So that's the information you have. You kind of have a clue about what's going on in terms of where we are. So this polar zone. But now the tactics of where do we want to drop. We can't drop right on their heads. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got some deploy position info, and it tells you why it's not allowed and if it's allowed or not. So I think just on the other side of this ridge is absolutely fine. We're dropping our force there, and in we come with the Leopard. This is going to be fun. Enemy contact. So that's essentially what happens on the sensors. that the enemy shows up and we're kind of into the fight immediately. Uh-oh, a little bit of flavor. And there's a unknown mercenary force. That's us. This is a message from the locals. They are engaging in maneuvers. Wonderful. So this mission might actually be a little trickier than anticipated. The game will throw a few surprises like that at you, which is kind of what makes it fun as well. So in the lore, you drop into your area of operations, you're stomping around, and then everything's fine, and then suddenly the enemy appears on sensors, which is kind of what happened just now, right as we drop, because we drop fairly close to them. We don't have any kind of visual on them because it looked like it's the night. A lot of our mechs, or as many mechs as I can see here, they all have their headlights on. So it's probably quite dark in the area of operations. That's fine. Here we go. So we went into initiative order, as you saw. So essentially combat has started, but with Roguetech, as it is now, it wasn't always the case. The first round is a positioning phase. So you can kind of decide, do you want to stay at range? Do you want to close in? What do you want to do? So this is their position, and this is the other guy. So we're kind of going straight in a line. I love that. No being flanked for me. So I'm actually going to charge them, but you don't need to see this positioning phase. I will be back in a second. Okay, our positioning phase has finished, and one of our pilots has the best initiative, so he will lead this round. This pilot is actually a little bit special. He is a former community member, or current community member, I'm not sure. But some of the most famous community members are pilots in the game, or in the mod, which is kind of cool, and they have special abilities. There's a lot of stuff with special abilities, including mechs with special abilities. We'll get to that in just a second. But this guy tends to be good at initiative. That's one of his things. So we're going to keep charging forward because this mech specifically is a punchy mech. I've actually designed it to punch a lot, although it's got plenty of weaponry. You can see all of these ER medium lasers, extended range medium lasers. But ideally what he wants to do is get into range and start punching other mechs or other vehicles. So we're going to charge up a little bit forward. Now you've got the over-the-shoulder view, as you can see. That's kind of nice to look at your line of sight. And then you have your chance to hit. As you can see, 28% all over, 28% for this guy as well. This guy was also 28%. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but in Roguetech, that is actually pretty decent. In Roguetech, when you see something like 50, 60%, you are celebrating. Unless it's super late game and you've got amazing pilots, amazing builds. Generally speaking, this kind of hit percentage is not bad. Let me show you. See that? That's actually quite a few hits. That's decent against that Firestarter, which is actually a quite light mech, 35 tons or so. It was used for crowd control a lot of the time in the lore, which means machine guns and flamethrowers. Do not ask how crowds were controlled. But yeah, hit chances in Roguetech are completely off the wall, and you'll have to start getting used to a new reality in terms of how they go. This is my Marauder 2R. Marauder is a really special mech in terms of lore. It was one of the first big bads in the books. I think the first book, the Marauder was the big bad, like the big, heavy, dangerous mech that the good guys had to fight down with their inferior quality weaponry. And this Marauder 2R specifically has lore implications. So it's like a standard. The 2R is like a royal version of the Marauder. And if you want to know more, I think Tex Talks Battletech, amazing channel that goes over everything Battletech. He's got like a 3-hour video on Marauders. And then he talks about the Marauder 2R, the royal Marauder. And if you listen to Tex a little bit, you'll really get an understanding of how some of these mechs were special. So that's kind of the reason why I have this Royal Marauder in my troop. It's not super special in this particular game, but it is really cool to have a Royal mech in there. More about the Royal stuff in a bit. Again, look at those hit chances. Not great. 40%, 47%, not very good. But we're going to go. I'm firing all my weapons, as you can see, from both of my mechs so far. So that's, again, a tactical choice. In the lore, you would have mechs that had long-range weapons, medium-range weapons, short-range weapons, and only fire, let's say, the long-range weapons when they were at long range. I have more of an alpha strike design methodology where I like all of my weapons to be able to hit, and I position my mechs in kind of medium to short range so that all of them can hit at the same regularity. Look at those hit chances, they're all kind of the same, which reflects my design philosophy. Here we go. Let's take that Firestarter down. Yeah, good hits. You can see the orange and the white there. Essentially, the white is the armor and the orange is the internal structure part of the mech. So you're trying to kind of tear down the armor in different components. Look at that. He's got a right arm and a right leg where there's no more armor. So any hits that land in these areas are going to do straight up structure damage. So that's going to disable the mech very quickly. If you deal critical hits to, for example, the arms, then the weapons start getting destroyed. So the weapons themselves can be hit. The legs, I don't think there's much in the leg over here. Nah, I don't think so. Obviously, the engine of the mech is in the center torso, normally. And the head portion is the cockpit. So the cockpit obviously doesn't have very much armor. There are headshot sniper builds that you can actually set up. I don't have one live right now, but that is one type of mech I do like to build. Obviously, if you just take out the middle of a mech, that's called coring, you're going to disable it. But you can actually do lots of critical damage and sort of take out its legs, both of its legs, and then it's done as well. Or you can just take out the side torsos and keep injuring the pilot, knock him out. There's so many ways to do it, and again, it all comes down to tactics. But again, this blue line here, that shows us that we are, and obviously this red outline that you can see on the sensor reading, that shows us we're attacking from that right side. So we've hit him twice with assorted volleys from this right-hand side, and we're going to keep hitting him from this side. So again, the angle of attack that we're kind of hitting him from this right-hand side, that also plays a part, because we can now damage vulnerable components. That guy wants to actually have his turn, so he can turn his left side, which has all of its armor still. He'd like to turn that side to us to try and take some of the impacts. I don't think he's going to actually get a chance. Those orange numbers there, those were internal structure shots. Doesn't look like we did too much damage to him, though, because each mech does have a fair amount of structure points, which, it's just the stuff, the mech muscle, that actually protects the vital components as well. And as we can see, the Firestarter is actually running out a little bit, or he's running back off the front line and trying to damage our ally unit. The light blue color is the ally unit, the whites and greens are our units, and the reds are always enemy units of different kinds. So, I have by far and away the better mechs in this contest, except for, well, that little Gallowglass is pretty strong, I would say. There's also a Munin Lamb somewhere. I'll show it to you in just a second. Right here, this Munin Lamb, that's a land air mech. Can we zoom in on him? Yeah, we can. It's kind of a hybrid of plane and mech. It's a bit silly, and they can be quite funky. Over here, there's a Thunderbolt, which is actually 65 tons and quite heavy, but my mechs are way better. I've got a couple of, the Cestus, for example, is a 65-tonner, I think. I've also got some good mediums, that is like 50, 55 tons, the Hunchback and the Uziel. Obviously, I've got this Marauder here, the Royal Marauder, which you saw a moment ago. I've got this Barghest, which is also pretty big. We'll get to that guy in a second. Do I have another Marauder? No, he's in repair, I think. And we've got this guy, the Rifleman Legend Killer. This is a super, kind of a unique mech from the lore. Although in the game you will run into different instances of them. That's why you can take them down and loot them and rebuild them yourself, which is what I've done. You might not rebuild them in the original stock configuration, but you can kind of customize them. And these unique or named or hero mechs have something special to them. There could be a special quirk or a special set of locked equipment which doesn't break, which makes them really amazing. And the Legend Killer is amazing in terms of this game, as well as in the lore. I think it was in books 4, 5, and 6, somewhere there. Legend Killer was a big focus of those books. It was, again, one of the big bads, I think, or at least one of the main characters in those books used to pilot the Legend Killer. And it was a gladiator mech in the gladiatorial arenas. This Barghest is a quad mech. Essentially, it has 4 legs rather than 2, like a 4-legged animal. We're just going to scan around and see if we can get good hit chances on someone. Doesn't really look like the Barghest is in optimal range, so we're not going to fire everything. But this Gallowglass is shut down. He's overheated. So heat is another thing that we're going to play. Even though this is polar and it's an Arctic night, heat sinking obviously is going to be easier. It's cold, so mechs are not going to build up as much heat. Even so, it looks like he's overheated. The biome, the place you are, the initiative, the sensors or quality of sensor roll that you have, the stuff you're standing in even, can all make a difference. What do I mean by standing in? You can see this lava stuff. You can see this local fire. You can see the trees, even the little road here. Those are all different things you can stand in. And this area, this rubbly stuff, that's unstable. If I can get the Uziel up, I will show you that in a second. So the tactical depth is huge here because I can actually decide, do I stand in the forest and get a bit more defense? Should I stand in the road and get a bit more movement? Should I stand in this unstable stuff? Why? I don't know. I'm going to be unstable. Maybe it just gives me a better angle of attack. Do I stand in this lava stuff? and struggle with my heat sinking, although again, I might have a better angle. There are so many different little decisions you'll have to make. Each little hex can make a big difference in the grander scheme of things. So where can we get a good shot in? There was somebody. Yeah, this guy. Let's go. Let's try and whack him in the middle. Ooh, bang, 90. That's a big one. That weapon system is one of the biggest weapon systems, the Ultra Autocannon 20. It is devastating when it hits, but only one of the 2 shots hit for 90 damage. 90 is big. Okay, this is my legend killer, and he's got a lot of funky different weaponry on. Let's watch him hit this Helios, who is almost a nothing mech. Not very special in any kind of way. Bang, bang, bang. Chopped into his structure. As you can see, he's pretty badly damaged on that left-hand side now, if we get a sensor reading. We saw Unsettled popped up, so the pilot getting that kind of hit on him from one mech was, let's say, a little bit nervous now about his existence. Because again, this is dangerous stuff. We are getting shot at by missiles, by lasers, by ballistics. And if a big stompy like this, which is supposed to be something like 20 to 25 meters tall, when it falls down and you're sitting in it, that could hurt too. So dangerous stuff. Here goes the Thunderbolt at us. Fun, fun, fun. So I'm not going to actually take too long in this battle. I might just exit in a moment. But we've actually taken a good look at what's going on, how firing works. As you can see, shots can miss and hit other people. There's area of effect weapons. There's different types of weapons as well. We just saw a mech overheat because he fired all of his laser weapons. Laser weapons are light, but they do decent damage. However, they have a heat cost. You need to throw in lots of heat sinks or better heat sinks in your mechs or other kinds of advanced equipment to try and offset that heat. Look at that. That's kind of what happens when you overheat. You shut down, and then you become comparatively easy to hit. We're firing at long range here, which is why it wasn't super duper easy to hit him, but still it was easier than otherwise. Ooh, I just took a 120 damage hit from long range from that Rommel over there. What is it? What does he have? Yes. Hypervelocity Autocannon 20. So my Ultra Autocannon 20 is still more powerful, but that HVAC can hit very hard. Now, unfortunately, our Kung Fu mech or Mech Fu mech is not in range to hit just yet. But as you can see, these hit chances are getting better as he gets closer in because you're going into more optimal or point blank range for these shots. Still, he fired a bunch of lasers and that Thunderbolt is completely happy with life at the moment. Those are our ally units, and that's unsteady. So stability and steadiness can actually knock a mech off balance, and then he becomes super easy to hit. The difference here between this little triangle, that's unstable, and he has no evasion, whereas our Hunchback here has 6 evasion. Essentially, this is a turn-based tactics game, so each mech is moving one, and then acting, or acting and then moving. That's an advanced perk for some mechs and pilots. But when you think about what's actually going on here, everything is supposed to be happening in real time. For example, if you were playing MechWarrior 5 Clans or something like that, everything is happening together. Everybody's moving and firing together. It's just complete chaos. But this is the turn-based interpretation of it, and therefore, we have this evasion score, which kind of defines how much a mech is moving around, zigzagging, or moving fast, and therefore is more difficult to hit. Whereas unstable means he is much, much easier to hit because he's kind of slowed down, let's say, and is trying to regain control of his mech. He's kind of lost control for a little bit, and he's lost stability. So that's kind of cool how that plays out into the turn-based system. Look at that, 81%, whereas this guy's 51%, because he does have a little bit of evasion, I think. I can't really get a read on the evasion scores that they have. That could be a sensor thing. But I can still land more weapons on this guy. So let's keep going at him. Oopsie, didn't get much on him. Still, the pilot's not very happy with life. So let's just get our Royal Marauder going forward a little bit. Look at this, rough terrain. Just to explain what I said before, plus 50% stability damage from all attacks. So more chance to go into this unstable state if you get onto rough terrain, which is what he is in now. These orange bits and the little rubble icon. And then all of these other things. So polar is still active, and then that's another rough terrain. 4 sources provide this effect. Ouchie. And here, let's just do this for the example. Now we're in geothermal. So what does geothermal do? Units on lava terrain gain 15 heat per turn. So you're gaining heat per turn and only sink 75% of their normal heat. So that is a massive debuff on your heat sinking. For example, if we were going to fire everything, we're going straight into overheat alert. Whereas this mech can normally Alpha Strike, so firing everything is an Alpha Strike. It can normally Alpha Strike and use only half of its heat threshold, or 60%. But now it's going into overheat because of standing on volcanic terrain. Why would you do this? Basically, line of sight cover. As you can see here, we've got these boulders in line of sight. So if I wanted to hide, for example, if I got hits taken like this guy, I could then hide him behind a little bit of line of sight cover. Missiles could still arc over and get him, but maybe stuff like ballistic would not be able to get him for a turn or two. So you're using line of sight and positioning as well as the different weapon systems and the different electronics and stuff that you have. Vision and sensors. You've got electronic warfare. I always put electronic shielding on my mechs. Just makes them harder to hit and therefore less costs on repair, less chance that they go down, or at least they take a little longer to go down because nobody's hitting them. I'm still going to Alpha Strike because I'm that kind of guy. All right, let's move forward with the Cestus. I'm just going to show you until I've got the Hunchback moving in and punching, so let's not actually hit his punch target. Let's try and bring down the Helios. Okay, a little bit of a structure hit. Right torso destroyed. There we go. And we saw the animation of stuff falling off. So his Gauss rifle has been destroyed. So again, that could be something that you do tactically. As we saw before, we were hitting the fire starter early on its right-hand side. So maybe you see that one of the mech's biggest weapons, either you see through your sensors. For example, I can look at this Vulcan over here, right-click him, and then I can have a look at this. I know what weapons he has, and I know what these things are. Let's right-click on the arm. He's got a heavy flamer there. This arm, MG heavy, or heavy machine gun. Center torso, he's got jump jets, engine, blah, blah, blah. He's got, on the right-hand side, his flamer ammo, and his plasma ammo, and his machine gun ammo is all in here. So actually blowing this up would really disable him. He has a case 2 system down there, the last entry, so that actually protects him from big explosions. So if you've got uncased ammo and it blows up, your mech is basically gone or very severely disabled. So that's a really big problem, but the case 2 can help offset that a little bit. Still, he won't be able to fire his heavy flamer, he won't be able to fire his machine gun or his plasma gun if you take out this part of the mech. So you could actually be strategic that way. And for the Helios, for example, you would take out the right arm to knock out the Gauss, or the right-hand side torso. I think it's the right arm, actually. Yeah, it's the right arm where the Gauss is in. So the arm is actually pretty easy to destroy if you shoot from that side. So if you were playing the Helios, if it was one of your units, you'd probably try and face the left-hand side towards the opposition, or towards the enemy force, so that you don't take hits on the Gauss rifle, which is kind of your main weapon. Even though these SRMs are not bad. Where are the SRMs, by the way? Ooh. One SRM on the right torso, which is dead as well, and that's where his ammo was. So his SRM, which is here on the left torso, is also disabled because we've taken out the ammo storage. So all he's got left is a couple of medium lasers. And he could charge, which is kind of nasty. Like he could just kamikaze and smash into you, which is really deadly. But generally speaking, as a fighting unit, he's pretty much disabled, and we could probably focus on other stuff, which we'll do with our Barghest. We'll take out one of these. Let's go for this guy, this Vulcan here, with a hyper laser. Why did I just do that? Move the laser in front of the ballistic weapon. Well, I don't actually know. But generally speaking, a laser is better at burning off armor, and then ballistics are good at punching through armor. So sometimes less armor to punch through can be a good thing, although it could still punch through armor which is fully intact as well. Tactics and strategy is also a factor when it comes to choosing what weapons to build into this mech. For example, this guy has 2 big hitting weapons. A lot of my other mechs had more smaller weapons. So that's another decision you need to take. If your pilots are amazing and the mechs are amazing, a big weapon has a good chance to hit. But if they're not so good, you might want to take, more rolls on less chance, having a few hits, rather than one big weapon just missing and missing and missing and missing and missing. That's another decision you have to take. Obviously, early game, you would probably go with more small weapons. Later game, you can start moving into these massive, but kind of all-in weapons. Also, the different types of weapons, as I said, lasers tend to burn off armor really well. Ballistics are really heavy. They can punch through armor. Missiles do a lot of damage instances. So each missile hit is a damage instance, which makes them amazing for like shooting down critical components. So you can open up a mech with, for example, a laser, and then blast lots of missiles into his internals and get critical hit, critical hit, critical hit. So that's another way to play the game too. Again, so much strategy. You can have mechs which are all laser focused to damage units, and then follow up attack with a missile mech. That's always a nice strategy too. Ooh, we got hits. And honestly, a Vulcan is a really small mech. It can't take more than one of those big weapons. So if we just land one, he's in trouble. Okay, I'm going to fast forward to my Hunchback because I want to show you what a mech mech can actually do. Alright, we're ready to go. Are you ready for some mech foo? So I'm just going to go out of the battle once I actually execute this, but I want to show you what else you can do aside from picking amazing weapon systems and combining them and setting up stealth mechs and all of that kind of thing. Jumping mechs, flying mechs, you can kind of do anything. But I love melee. Mechs can kick, punch, use physical weapons. So I also have an axe mech. I've got the axe mech and this guy punching. They can also charge, which is kind of a self-destructive move. It's very much a Hail Mary if you're in a lot of trouble. Because the mech that you charge into another mech will also take a lot of damage and could be unstable. And then it'll get destroyed by the, the friends of the guy it just took out with that big old kamikaze charge. Point is, we're going to go for a punch. We've also got a sensor reading on where the damage is. Looks like most of it is in the center torso. His back is absolutely fine, but back armor tends to be thinner. So we could probably punch him. Again, if one of the sides was damaged, I might actually try and punch him in the side. Nothing really. He's got not very much back armor. Look at that. He's only got 35 back armor in there and 50 in those locations. Whereas here he's got 75, 76 left, 81, 75 left. So the back armor is so thin that will go into the back arc, I think, and punch. So this melee punch is going to do 129 damage, divided into a certain number of instances. Normally it's 2 because these mechs have 2 arms, at least the Hunchback here has 2 arms. You may or may not see it right now. You'll see it definitely later. And this pilot is kind of special. He does a couple more punch instances, and you can add equipment to the mech that does even more punch instances. So you kind of also have to do a little bit of math. You need to know how much total damage you do in a punch and then divide it by the right number of punch instances to do a critical amount of damage. Why? Because a punch has a very good chance of hitting a cockpit. And the cockpit, as you can see up there, it has 45 armor normally and 16 structure normally across the board. Math tells me that number is 61. So if you can do more than 61 damage on a punch, you have a very good chance of one-shotting a mech. This mech, however, it does more damage when it gets hot, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. Look at that. The TSM down there, it does X 1.5 melee damage when it's active, and it activates when we get hot. So it's not going to work really in these polar locations, but this mech actually wants to be a hot boy. When he's not a hot boy, he does a bit less damage, which is why the math doesn't really work out. Now, I think we're going to do 129 divided by 4 or 5. Let's have a look at how that works. Did I click? I didn't click. Let's try that again. Sometimes Roguetech can be a bit funky. Let's go. Attack. There we go. Boom. Animations. 32. There we go. My math was right, yeah? 30-something because 129 divided by 4. And then we've got the follow-up laser shots into that back area. We can't fire handheld weapons when punching, obviously. But the Hunchback, it has a lot of weapons on its torso. So it makes for a really interesting melee mech because you can punch and then fire off all of your torso-carried weapons too. And after you take a hit like that, this guy is destabilized. He's almost completely destabilized. So we can follow up by knocking him on his butt. Let's have a go. Ooh, look at this. Our Marauder 2R, the Royal Marauder, is getting very hot. Let me show you what happens when we get way too hot. So he's going to get knocked over. Even one hit was enough to knock him over. We've destroyed his right arm, so those big weapons in the right side are down, and down he goes onto his butt. As I said, he's going to take damage from that. The pilot's going to panic, and our mech failed a shutdown override, as you can see. Because we got so hot, the pilot in the books and stuff is just smashing the override button. Don't shut down, don't shut down, don't shut down. He failed it in this case. That is a dice roll in Roguetech, which was failed. It is a guts roll, I think. Guts because it's getting super hot and the pilot might just allow it to shut down because they don't really want to be cooked alive in that mech. On that topic, actually, we need to transition away because I don't really want to go any further down into that topic. I will see you back in the Mech Bay. All right, we are back in the Mech Bay. You had a look at the tactics in missions, so mechs moving forward or moving backwards, different facings, showing the stronger sides or the sides without any vulnerability in terms of components or damage to the enemy, or keeping your big guns away from the enemy, things like that. you saw that mechs can do a lot of different things. For example, this guy here, the Berserker, this is an axe. I can't really show you yeah, I can, of course. It's a video. Let's go. Let's refit. Let's stop the work that we were doing on him and have a look. Look at this. A 10-ton hatchet on the right-hand side and a mech lance 10 tons on the left-hand side. So these are both melee weapons. Just like the punchy mech, this guy's going to get in close and hammer them. He's also got a null signature system, which is a stealth armor. He's got active camouflage, which is also stealth. Both of them act in different ways. One of them is mimetic stealth. The other one is sensor stealth. Essentially, think about that as your sensors being obviously you don't show up on the electronics of opposition mechs, and mimetic is kind of the visual angle of stealth. So I've put in both of those systems to make sure that this guy's as ghostly a big boy as possible. He is a big boy. He's 100 tons, which is kind of the maximum for a normal mech. This is an assault class mech. Assault class goes from 80 to 100. Heavies are like 60 to 75. Mediums are kind of 40 to 55. And lights are 20 to 35. So those are the different classes of mechs. You've also got super heavies, which are more than 100 tons, 100 to 200. That was introduced in one of the DLCs, and Roguetech does use them. You do not have to have all of the DLCs to play Roguetech. But they do help. That said, if you don't want the super heavies and the 100 plus mechs, just don't buy the heavy metal DLC. That's fine. So again, the building of mechs is a big deal. And a lot of the fun is building out different mechs and then putting the right pilots in them. Now, all of these different things, as I said earlier, can be configured and changed up. You've got base components. So life support A is kind of a base component. Almost every mech will have that. And we've upgraded it by putting in a life support A component, which gives piloting stat boosting. So it's just a higher quality component in there. Just think about it like your cockpit. You've just made it a bit better and the joysticks are better and stuff like that. The fire control system, there's the standard underneath. We've upgraded it with a blood sport, which gives melee accuracy and initiative. So we want initiative. We want to go first before the other guys go. And then we want to be able to hit on melee attacks a little bit better. So Bloodsport was a good choice. We've got a cockpit hot seat. I'm not going to explain all of this stuff, but it's a combination unit. It gives a few different things. It increases carry capacity. It increases damage, blah, blah, blah. Sensor Recon helps your stealth side of things. So that's another boost there, a stacking boost to the stealth side of the mech. Again, there's piloting there because piloting is the stat that helps melee. A mech has to be a good pilot to be able to actually walk around with the legs and then hit with the hands. If you think about it, it must be pretty complex to do. So piloting skill is the one that allows them to do it properly. I've also got this repeating TSEMP. You won't get this kind of equipment in the base game. This is very much a Roguetech thing. This has a chance of shutting down opposition units. And then this fluid gun with oil, it can impair their move. So as he closes in, he shuts them down or he makes sure that they can't move. And then he smashes them with his hatchet and his mech lance. That's kind of the build I'm going for on this mech. I've improved it with melee actuators. I've got a grippy hand on one side. I should probably put that on another side. This retractable blade is another thing that boosts up melee damage. The fact that this guy has a 400 class engine is the maximum possible movement. So the bigger the engine, the more the movement. Kind of goes for cars as well, right? That's kind of the logic. If you want to figure out movement speed, you can see the movement speed is 4, weight is 100 tons, engine core is 400. You can probably see the math there. Engine core divided by tonnage equals movement. So if you've got the engine core 400 in a mech that's like 50 tons, it would move 8. I don't know if a mech that light can actually put a 400 engine in. It's probably possible. I don't know. I'm not enough of a mad lad to actually try that because these things are heavy. If we take it out, look at that, 66.53. This thing goes in, it's 96.78. So it's like 30-ton engine. I've also put an XL. So it's an XL. It's a 400 XL engine, extra light, but also that does this. Look at these slots here, how they change. The XL engine puts 3 slots in both sides. So you're trading off tonnage for space. So if tonnage was the problem, you would actually put an XL in. If space is a problem, you don't want something like an XL because you actually prioritize space. You want to fit in lots of light, small components that take up space. You don't want something like an XL because you've got the tonnage. You just don't have the space. So you're kind of trading off space and tonnage. And in fact, in this game, it's all about trade-offs, building mechs and things like that. For example, lots of laser weapons. As I said before, they get pretty hot. That's the trade-off. They do lots of damage. They're really light in terms of weight. but they get you really hot. So then you have to have good double heat sinking, for example. I've got internal heat sinks, a +6 here. So that puts more heat sinks into the engine. The bigger the engine, the more internal heat sinks it can have. I've also got an AMS system. That's an anti-missile system. And I was talking about trade-offs. Missile weapons are quite light. They can do a lot of damage. They do lots of criticals, but they can get shot down by systems like this one. That's kind of one of the trade-offs of missiles. It's super fun to actually put together different builds like this. Let's have a look at another one. The Legend Killer. Let's have a look at the Legend Killer. I have absolutely boosted this guy as much as I can. I've got 2 ultra autocannons in the side. These are ballistic weapons, but look at that. They are 10 tons. Each of these is 10 tons. Meanwhile, the medium laser is 1 ton. It does 30 damage for 1 ton. There's mathematics there. This thing does 100 damage for 10 tons. So it kind of does 10 damage per ton, right? And this thing does 30 damage per ton. So obviously the medium laser is better, right? Question mark? Not really. It does a lot of heat. This thing, the medium laser, 18 heat. The ultra autocannon, 18 heat. So same heat, but this thing does 100 damage and is 10 tons. So you just do the math. Mechs also have different slots. So for example, this particular Rifleman Legend Killer, it can put a ballistic and an energy on both arms. You've got 2 ballistic, 2 energy here, 2 energy and a support over here. So you've got to work within these restrictions as well. Different chassis can mount different things, except for something like an Omni-Mech. This is the clan technology. If you've played MechWarrior Clans, you know about this. These are Omni slots. You can put whatever in here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be ballistic, doesn't have to be laser. It could be anything. Could be a missile weapon, could be a support, could be anything. Except for this one. This is a locked slot. So this has to be ballistic. Whereas these 3 can be anything. So this is Omni-Mech technology. That's part of the clan advancements. We'll talk about the clans in just a second. But again, the different chassis can do different things. You can see probably here at the bottom right, all of its components are bracket C. That's clan tech, which is generally better. Although things like clan lasers run a lot hotter. But they give you better range and better damage. So again, it's a trade-off. Now, keeping in mind things like movement and different weapon types and stuff like that, you've also got to check out your pilots. For example, let's look at Wraith. Wraith has Gunnery 8. So these are all stats. There's just 4 stat trees, and however you level them up, you can put 2 bonuses in one tree and 1 bonus in the other tree. And you can kind of develop different pilot builds like that. Wraith, for example, has Focus Fire, which does 1 less recoil. So she's pretty good at things like autocannons, which go daka 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 daka, and recoil. Rotary autocannons, ultra autocannons, things like that have a property called recoil. Again, if you play one of the FPS versions of the game, like MW5 Clans or Mercs, you will actually see the recoil in first-person mode. And a pilot with recoil reduction from this source, as well as potentially from a perk like this, Military, that does -1 recoil as well. So she has -2 recoil as a result of this gunnery level up and as a result of her military tag that she had herself when I hired her. She's a pretty good pilot. The purple background here is a pretty good pilot. They have more tags and stuff. So she has -2 recoil. So she can fire these big ballistic weapons without too much of a problem. I've also leveled her up into hard case, which takes less stability damage. I've also given her coolant vent, which is like a cooling ability. So she's kind of ballistics and laser, a mix of the two, or ultra autocannon 20s, which do quite a bit of heat as well. So she's kind of a solid hold the line kind of fighter. Meanwhile, this one, this Wraith, that's a bit confusing, isn't it? No, let's go for Raga. Okay. Yes, I know this one is from Vikings. They have a few, like Avend over here. They have a few portraits taken out of the Viking series. Great series if you've never watched it on the History Channel, I think it was. I don't know. Anyway, Raga has a thing called Gladiator, I believe. Yes, Solaris Gladiator, which does more punch, kick, and physical melee damage. Essentially melee. She's also got military and command experience and blah, 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 but melee. She's got melee. So I've made her a melee pilot that comes with guts and level ups like Juggernaut, where she braces after melee and DFA, which is death from above. Yes, you can actually have a mech that jumps and lands on other mechs' heads. That is hilarious and very much a meme, and I love it. In the lore, there's a mech called the Highlander, which I unfortunately don't have yet, which had a speciality of jumping. It had really strong legs. It would jump up and land on other mechs and kind of bury them into the ground because it was a 90-ton unit, and that was called the Highlander Burial. So Actually, a little bit of lore knowledge really enhances any kind of playthrough that you do. As you can see top left here, I've got my company's called Wolverine with this particular logo. Anybody who knows anything about the lore of Battletech will be like, aha! But I'm not going to explain too much about it here. It's one of the clans. Let's just put it like that. Or was one of the clans. But yeah, Raga also has this one, Escapist. She generates more evasion from movement, and she can generate more evasion in total. We mentioned earlier in the tactical side of the game that evasion is all about defense. It's like the more you move or the faster you move or whatever. So she generates more from movement, and she is a melee hitter. And which mech does she pilot normally? Let's actually look at it from here. Can we see the affinities? Yes, right here, we can see the affinities. As you can see, Raga has, or she is familiar with the Hatchet Man, and she's a fighter, so plus 10 physical weapon, plus 1 physical weapon accuracy for the Axeman and the Berserker. So I've always had her in melee mechs. I started her off in a Hatchet Man. She then upgraded to an Axeman, which is 65 tons. Hatchet Man's like 45. And now she's on my 100-ton Berserker, which I showed you before. So I've got a melee pilot on a melee mech with melee gear, and the stealth part of it, plus her own evasion bonus. You can see how I'm kind of leaning into those two angles with this pilot. That's kind of how it works with pilots and mechs. You got to match them up nicely. I've got Warlock over here who has, we're not looking at the recall this time, but the plus 6 call shot multiplier. Then this Warlord ability gives plus 10 call shot, so she's got like plus 16 call shot. Is there something on the service record? I think Assassin is plus 10 call shot. So there's like plus 20 call shot. She's also got plus 3 OP accuracy, so offensive push. Essentially, I'm trying to level up Warlock and make her a sniper. I mentioned earlier that it's possible to build a sniper mech. She's got all of the stats and stuff that go into that. She's not there yet, though. This is kind of a POV character, kind of, I think. And she's a space pirate as a result of that. Space pirate, assassin, criminal, reckless, loner. Not a very nice person, generally speaking. But there you go. Leveling up as a sniper. At some point, she's going to get a mech, which also boosts call shot and boosts offensive push. And then we'll be able to pull out some really precise shots. Maybe not with super amounts of damage, but precise headshots. It just needs one good contact with the right grade of weapon and job done. Okay, so we've covered all of the good stuff. We've covered the gameplay. We've covered the mech building and the Mech Bay and the... Honestly, you can build so many different types of mechs. You can build fast, jumpy ones. You can get, hit and run mechs like this Viper. For me, is a bit of a hit and run mech. You've got stuff like the Marauder 2R, the Royal mech, has a special Royal heatsink, which actually helps with the heat reduction by giving a little bit more in terms of heat reduction. The Rifleman Legend Kill, I didn't really show it to you properly, but its unique thing is the Sensors Tracker Mark II. This is like a locked item, so it'll never get destroyed, whereas these things that you drag and drop in, they can get destroyed, and then you lose them. Then you go with whatever's there, unless you've got another piece. But this is the thing that makes it the Legend Killer, or half of it, and it gives lots of accuracy at extreme long and medium range, not at short range. So this guy needs to be kind of far away, so he's a bit of a sniper, kind of. And then you've got Mech Quirks, so this is Legend Killer. 360 firing arc. That's part of the lore thing where it could kind of be walking one way and be firing straight back, essentially. Most mechs don't work like that, but the Rifleman does. And then because it's Legend Killer, it's a bit more than the Rifleman. It has anti-air, which is a Rifleman thing, but it's got even more accuracy. So accuracy there, accuracy here, super accurate mech. That's why the Legend Killer is so amazing in this game, because of how accurate it is. But to be honest, it's lovely to have like a named hero mech from the lore. If you've read all the books about the Legend Killer and Grey Norton and stuff like that, that's the guy who piloted the Legend Killer. It's really cool to kind of have it running around in your LAN. Speaking of all the lore, let me just give you a super fast brief. I mentioned all of these factions, the neo-feudalism kind of thing. Depending on your start time, as I mentioned again, you will have a different map layout. But basically, you've got these different houses. This is the Lyran Commonwealth, House Steiner. They're kind of the Germanic, Nordic type guys. They speak German. That's the official language of this entire thing. They're like very, very strong, and they use really heavy mechs is their thing. Even their quote-unquote scout lances were just all made up of assault mechs. That's one of the running jokes of the lore. This is Davion, who tended to be Steiner allies right on the other side of the map there. This is the universe, by the way, or galaxy. And Davion are kind of French-English kind of cultures. Here you have Kurita, which is based on Japanese culture, so that's the Draconis Combine, or House Kurita. Here you used to have a different house, I think it was Rasselhag, but in this timeline, so the 3080s timeline, the clans have come down, and there's a bunch of, I think this is Clan Wolf, Clan Jade Falcon, Clan Ghost Bear, etc., etc. There's another clan somewhere here, I think this is Raven, or Raven Alliance, which is what they became later on. This is the Capellans, kind of like Chinese descendant, kind of inspiration taken from Chinese culture, but I would say they're very much modern American politics is what those guys are. And they tend to be the villains of most of the books, along with Kurita, although Kurita then becomes more of an interesting one. A lot of fans of Kurita, not as many fans of Capellans, although there are some, you have to say. Over here, you've got the Free Worlds League, which are kind of like a mishmash of Eastern European, Indian, all of that stuff together. In this timeline, the Free Worlds League got hammered because they allied up with the super duper bad guys that were in play between like 3050 and 3080 in the timeline, who are over here. No, over here, there's a little outpost of them here. We're not talking about them. Very, very bad. And then, of course, you have the clans who sailed up to here. These are the clan homeworlds. Different clans, Star Adder, Cloud Cobra we saw, whoever that is. And that's Cloud Cobra again. Yeah. So the clans part of the lore is also really, really interesting. Like I said, the timelines are around 3020, 3040, 3080, stuff like that. But around 25 or so, 26, humanity kind of unified in this kind of way. This is Republic of the Sphere. Kind of like the real descendants of the Star League. The Star League were here in the middle, but then, as it happens, they got politicized, and one of them decided to bugger off with all of the Star League troops, who then became, spoiler alert, the clans, where they essentially had an exodus and they left space, and then came back in a very, very changed form. Some of them were the good guys, some of them were the bad guys, so on and so forth. Just on the note of DLC, you've got these little blinky points here. Those are Flashpoints. That's also a DLC for this game. They're essentially little campaign-contained storylines. The campaign of the original game, Battletech, is in one of these Flashpoints. It's not active right now. They kind of come in and out of activity. But you'll see a lot of really cool storylines, including a few of the book storylines, get played out in these Flashpoints. And it's kind of fun because you can actually decide to go one way or the other. If you've read the books, you kind of have a clue of what's going on, but you can side with the other guys. It's kind of fun. Some of the Flashpoints are from the main game. Some of the Flashpoints are via mods, which are then packaged into Roguetech and given out. So some of it, the quality assurance isn't quite there in terms of the text, the story. May not be 100% because they are part of mods. But it's really fun to play those kind of missions and know that you're coming up against those particular people. Here you can click on a flashpoint. This is the Arano Restoration Coronation flashpoint, which is the story, the campaign of the main Battletech base game. So you don't actually lose anything from Battletech if you just play Roguetech, although I would recommend, just to get kind of used to the UI, play Battletech a little bit before you get onto Roguetech. And then you've got all these other flashpoints that you can experience as well. Some of them are, like I said, from the books or from the lore. Let me try and find a good one from the lore. This one isn't quite lore, but I think this one has to do with one of the biggest conspiracy theories in the Battletech, like, lore fan whatever. It's derivative of that, and it's really fun to play through. I don't know what Agent Smith is doing there, to be honest. But there you go. Again, mods. You never know what you get with mods. Whatever it is a good time. Anyway, that has been the Roguetech mod. As I said earlier, this is one of the most granular, in-detail tactical experiences that I have ever come across, with the different things that you can do with these mechs, the different components that you can remove, add, include, the different mech builds that you can have, combine it with the pilots, combine with the terrain that you have to go into, the different places that you can go into within the terrain. Like I said, the rubble, the lava, the radiation zones, the forests, the bugs, whatever it is, the water for additional heat sinking as well. The amount of fun you can have with this is incredible, although you may miss out a little bit on the whole point of it, aside from just building up money and fighting in battles. That might get a little bit old and stale, but then you can really breathe life into it by getting into a little bit of the lore, maybe watch a few YouTube videos, I can 100% recommend Tex Talks Battletech. I'll try and have a picture up here, maybe even a link in the description. He does the most incredible lore videos, very in character, a lot of wonderful little jokes and stuff like that. It's so good. And once you start watching/listening to a few of Tex's videos, you'll probably find a few other lore breakdowns. There's tons and tons for free on YouTube. The comic series is for free on YouTube as well, so you can get into it that way. And then if you want, have a look at the books from Catalyst Game Labs. I think the ebooks, some of them are a good read, some of them aren't. But the first couple of books, you can't really go wrong with reading about them and the Grey Death Legion. I think most of the ebooks are like $5 a pop. So, hope you've enjoyed this. Maybe I've given you inspiration to try a new game, try a new universe. Honestly, I've got many more hours in Roguetech than I have on anything else. I've just actually gone into my Steam to check it. I've got 2,586 hours in Battletech. I want to say about 40 hours on the base game. That's then 2,500 plus hours of enjoyment. That's literally months and months of enjoyment on Roguetech. I guarantee you, give it a try. If you like tactics, if you like detail, if you like the granular, the gritty stuff, if you like to be able to chop and change every little thing and see how that works and come up with crazy builds, this is definitely the tactical experience for you. If you want me to do more on Battletech, to go deeper into different areas, things like mech building or pilots or whatever it is, just tactics and surviving the early game, for example, because you might actually lose your first mission several times over. The early game is super duper hard. The early to mid and then the mid game is pretty easy. And then again, the late game gets really hard. That's kind of how it works. If you're interested, if you get into the game, if you don't like it, whatever it is, I will talk to you as I am now with the visual of the fantastic Royal Marauder in the comments below. Cheers!